Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Birding with Extension's Cup Chat this week. We are so excited to have you join us and special guest Kelsey Low with the Houston Arboretum and Native Plant Society with us today. And so we are talking about making our yards more bird friendly, and specifically we're going to talk a lot about native plants, right, Kelsey? Kind of give us your background. Introduce yourself to the world, since I've done such a terrible job this morning, and kind of give us the 411 on you and maybe how you've been involved in birding and bird-friendly backyards.
Great. My name is Kelsey Low. I work as the Adult Programs Manager at the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center. So we are a private nonprofit in the city of Houston, and what started as a botanic garden, so you guys may be familiar with arboretums as kind of formal, beautiful planted gardens with plants from all over the world. The Houston Arboretum actually changed its mission in the 60s to be more focused on native plants. And so I grew up in Houston. I was always interested in animals. I started bird watching after a science unit on birds in 4th grade. So I've been birding for about 25 years.
So you are a lifelong birder.
I am. My parents, bless their hearts, encouraged me. They got me a field guide, and I've never looked back.
Oh.
So I went to college for biology, actually up in Canada, because that's where I was originally born, at the University of Victoria, and did a lot of bird stuff. After college, during college, I was focused on biology and environmental studies. So that's kind of when I started learning about the importance of native plants. Because in that program, we focused mostly on native plants as a source of food for humans, because we were talking about anthropology and stuff like that. But I was slowly becoming how important it was for native animals. And then I did bird banding after college, worked with warblers and saw-whet owls, and bounced around for a while doing more bird work and biology work. And then I ended up back in Houston. I thought, I should look up the Arboretum. I did field trips there when I was a kid. Maybe it would be something worth checking out. And that they hired me. And now I've been working there for 5 years, teaching folks about bird watching and native plants through all kinds of means: gardening, cooking. I just taught a cooking class last weekend.
Wait. So pause for a second. You're telling me we can cook with our native plants?
You can cook with native plants, absolutely. Actually, a number of the plants that I was going to talk about today for birds are equally as good for humans.
We may have to have you back on just for a separate fun cup chat where we talk about eating native plants. Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Or we can just tell everybody that if they're interested in learning how to cook native plants, they need to contact you and go visit and take one of your cooking classes. That is crazy.
Well, we're kind of cheating because in Texas, certainly, and in Houston specifically, we have things like blackberries, which are native. So,
so we're not just eating like the...
But there's lots of good things. I always struggle trying to apply it to other parts of Texas, because there's I don't know as much about the plants outside of Houston, but beautyberry is a good example. Beautyberry doesn't really look edible. It's a bright, hot, pink, round berry, and it smells like medicine when you pick it, and they're terrible raw. They're really, really awful. I don't recommend eating them raw. But if you cook them and add a lot of sugar, you get the most amazing jelly. It's incredible. It's like a deep magenta pink, and it tastes like grape and cherry candy.
Oh. Well, and the funny thing you mentioned, and my mother can appreciate this, is if you add brown sugar or sugar to anything, it makes it edible. My mother didn't eat vegetables, and so we would always add brown sugar to our green beans and brown sugar to our baked beans. And I mean, anything we could, if it wasn't good, we added sugar, and it made it all better. So that's funny. So, okay, back to birds and plants, not eating plants, because that, I feel like we could talk about that for several hours. So.
Yes. So birds and plants. So when I started working at the Arboretum, I had this background current of native plant interest, mostly focused on human uses of plants. It's ethnobotany, it's just a fancy word for how humans use plants. But then interested in birds and bird conservation, and becoming less focused on looking for rarities and traveling, which is great, don't get me wrong. But because of the way my job works, it's harder for me to travel. So I've been focusing more on really getting to know the birds in my space, and really focusing on the conservation of the birds in that space, since that's part of our mission at the Arboretum. And realizing finally after 25 years of birding that birds need plants, that birds don't just exist in a vacuum, that they rely on the landscape and how important the plants are. And the more I learn about it, the more I get really excited about it. So that's kind of been fueling my most recent classes and lectures and things, is the intersection of birds and native plants.
So I'm guessing that's going to kind of kick off our first question is, why should we, maybe you can tell us a little more in depth, why we should care about plants if we like birds?
So,
and
yeah.
What do plants have to do with birding? You kind of answered those already, but we'll kind of let you expand on those.
So it's easy to just focus on the birds and let the plants be a green background. Like my goofy video background behind me, you can see it's a green prairie. I'm guessing most of you bird watchers are looking for the Savannah sparrows and the LeConte sparrows and whatever else is going to be hanging out in that little prairie behind me. But what you might not be seeing is the bushy blue stem, which is this goofy fuzzy grass over here, and all of the swamp sunflowers, those beautiful yellow flowers, and all the goldenrod, which is kind of hidden among the sunflowers. The only reason those sparrows are there in the prairie is because of those plants. So the bushy blue stem, the swamp sunflowers, and the goldenrod, those are all producing the seeds that are feeding the adult sparrows. Even more importantly, like say you're watching your cardinals in your backyard coming to your bird feeder, you might think, that's all I need. I need a bird feeder with seeds. I got my beautiful cardinals. I get to watch them. But you're missing half the picture. This is where it really starts to matter to have plants, because you might think, well, I see cardinals coming to my bird feeder. I have, a sunflower. That's enough, right? No, because what do baby cardinals eat? Baby cardinals don't eat seeds. Baby cardinals eat bugs. The vast majority of land birds, so birds that are songbirds or woodpeckers or hawks and raptors, things that aren't living over the ocean, the majority of those birds either eat insects as adults or they eat insects as babies. Cardinals, titmice, chickadees, all those guys that we see coming to our feeders eating seeds as adults, they don't eat seeds when they're babies. They eat insects, especially caterpillars. And what do insects eat? They eat plants. So I actually have a little quiz for your viewers.
Oh.
Will allow me to put up a little image here for a second.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's funny you kind of talk about baby birds and mama birds and what they eat. And if I kind of relate, it kind of takes me back to like 4th grade science class and that whole like circle of life and how everything in that ecosystem and how everything is just more connected than we probably think that we are. Okay, got it.
Okay, hang on. There we go. All right. Hopefully you guys didn't see the answer already. But here's my pop quiz. I know Carolina chickadees aren't everywhere in Texas, but they certainly are in the eastern part. And you can mentally substitute an appropriate area bird like a black-crested titmouse or something. But how many caterpillars does it take for an average chickadee family for one nesting season? To support one family of chickadees for one nesting season. So just one nest.
I'm going to have to go with D, Kelsey, because I think that there's no way, after we've talked about it, I'm just going to pick the most because I feel like that's where you're trying to take me here.
You are exactly right. It takes about 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars for one family of chickadees. That's a lot of caterpillars.
Well, and to think about, you have to have how many butterflies to make that many caterpillars?
Yes. So you need a lot of plants to produce that many caterpillars. And you think, okay, well, great. I just plant whatever random trees and shrubs and flowers and that'll be fine, right? Unfortunately, it's not that simple because the caterpillars that we have in Texas have lived for thousands and thousands of years with Texas native plants. They've learned to use the plants that they're in their environment because plants don't want to get eaten. plants are like anything else. They don't want to die. So they have all kinds of defenses. They'll have spines. They have a lot of chemicals in them. People immediately think of milkweeds, and that is a really good example. Milkweeds are full of horrible toxins just to keep insects from eating them. But some caterpillars have been able over thousands of years to develop the ability to develop special physiology to be able to handle those poisons so they can eat those plants. So monarch caterpillars have now developed the ability to eat milkweed and survive those poisons. So they're able to eat milkweed, but that means that they're so specialized that they can't eat anything else. So if you don't have milkweeds, you don't have monarchs. And it's the same with almost all of our caterpillars. Almost all of our caterpillars are what are called host specific. They're specific to one family, usually one genus, maybe even only a few species of plants, because it's just so hard to get past all those plant defenses. And when you start looking at the numbers, it's really kind of scary to see, like, let's say you planted a sycamore maple from Europe in your backyard because it looked pretty, and it's a tree, right? It's nice, it's got seeds, birds can use it. Only 4 North American caterpillars can actually eat it.
Oh, wow.
If you planted a native red maple, for at least Eastern Texas, you could get up to 31 species.
Yeah, nobody in Valverde in West Texas should be planting red maples over here.
No, not over there. So you would guys, what do you guys have? Like big, what's it called? Big leaf maple or something?
No, we plant rocks, Kelsey.
Oh, well, there's other native plants that you guys have up there.
There are, but jokingly, a lot of rocks.
You must have oaks out there. You've got to have native oaks in your region. But oaks are like, if you want, you're going to plant one thing to help birds. I mean, not everybody has space, but if you do have space, man, plant a native oak tree, because native white oak can support 134 species of caterpillars. Like an Asian species, like a sawtooth oak, might only support 1.
Wow.
Some of our oaks will support almost 500 species of caterpillars, which is just a mind-boggling amount of food. And that's the kind of level of food that birds need to really support their babies.
So the first thing we need to be thinking about is really having a tree in our yard, preferably an oak.
If you can, not everybody can. Not everybody has the luxury of having a tree. I have a great example. I live in a townhome. My garden is this tiny alley between 2 houses, well, 3 houses, my house and my 2 neighbors, and then the garage behind me. So it's this like partly covered, almost full shade strip of grass that's about the size of an average carpet. I definitely do not have space for an oak tree. So I understand that not everybody can have something nice like an oak tree, but even if you just have a tiny space like me, even if you can only plant plants in pots, like on your balcony, you can still grow natives and still support birds, even with your small amount of space. It's amazing to think on a grand scale, if you support habitat conservation, you're supporting giant amounts of bird species, whole populations. You might not be able to do that with your own backyard, but if you can plant one native species, one plant, and it has a few bugs on it, you might be the difference between life and death for a few birds in your neighborhood. Like during the big freeze, my tiny little yard, I found an orange-crowned warbler on the ground, poking around in my goofy full shade flower bed, taking shelter under the leaves and picking off all the frozen bugs off of my native plants. And so I might not be saving the whole species of orange-crowned warblers, but I at least saved that one, which is something. It's a step in the right direction. So you never know how much of a difference you're going to be making.
Well, and that's super neat to think about. And, you know, especially talking about the freeze and how just a little bit can make a difference. Thinking back about to our last cup chat with, or maybe one before, but we had the Bexar County Audubon president on, and they had a speaker who he worked in the medical district, and he only did, he gave a presentation because he lived in an apartment, and his apartment burning during the pandemic because he couldn't get out. And obviously as a healthcare professional was very busy. But that, and you know, you're so right. We have to make the space that we have applicable for what we want it to be, and building those bird friendly spaces so we can be part of the difference. So that kind of takes me into my next question. What if my thumbs aren't green?
That's nice because native plants generally are much lower maintenance than your average exotics. As long as you do your research. So native plants are kind of funny in that all the hard work is on the front end. Then once you've done all that hard research work to pick exactly the right plant for your space, then you're smooth sailing. To give some examples, I'm in Houston. Our ecoregion, and if you don't know what an ecoregion is, guys, look it up. Ecoregions are broad zones in Texas. Just Google Texas ecoregions and it'll pop up. There's a couple different schemes, but it's roughly the same idea. So these broad regions are defined by geology and climate and rainfall and temperature and all that good stuff. That kind of creates these similar communities. So I'm in the Gulf Coast prairies and marshes ecoregion. I'm on the coast. It's wet. We have mostly grasses. Originally, we would have had mostly grassland, not so much now. But I believe you are in the South Texas Plains ecoregion.
We are actually uniquely, hence from Burning the Border, we have 3 different ecoregions that meet here in Valverde County. So the
Cool.
You have some of that hill country region and then the South Texas brushy country coming up. So we kind of conglomerate all into one. I mean, that's one of the reasons that, shameless plug, Kelsey, that Burning the Border is so special is because we do see a mix. Not only are we on that central migration pathway, but we have the mix of the 3 ecoregions. So we do get some really unique species as we have lots of rivers here as well.
So ecoregions, if you know what your ecoregion is, that will help you determine what plants you get. And one resource that I absolutely adore is the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. It's based in Austin, but it covers the entirety of North America. If you go to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center website, it's wildflower.org. It's easy. You can actually search for native plants by Texas ecoregion. And it'll give you a curated list of native plants that'll grow really well where you are. And then if you look within that list to find plants that grow really well in your particular conditions, because native plants tend to be really specialized on microhabitats. Like I said, I have a full shade flower bed. I have nasty, wet clay soil in Houston. Great. There's tons of plants that grow in those nasty conditions. So I throw in some Gulf Coast penstemon, I throw in some maidenhair fern, I throw in some blue-eyed grass and some aquatic milkweed and some Cherokee sedge. Once they're established, they're good to go. They survive the freeze. They survive me forgetting to water them. They survive me forgetting to prune them. I call myself a Darwinian gardener. I just kind of let them go and see who lives. Yeah, so if you have a not green thumb, welcome to the club. I'm a particularly good gardener, but native plants are probably your answer.
Yes, well, I think that's a great point is the works on the front end in terms of the research aspect of making sure you pick the right plants, which it would happen no matter what kind of plants you are growing. If you are growing, I mean, even if you just go to Home Depot, you still got to read the tag to say if it says full sun or full shade. And so that's something that research up front is a great example of a great resource, the later Baron Johnson. And so here's a question, and it's not necessarily about me, but what if somebody out there doesn't have a yard and they just have a porch or patio? What are some great container plants, maybe container native plants and creating that native garden in pots? Well, what are some great examples of things that you could do there?
So there's some really good examples. I'm actually going to show some images because I have a few of my top 6. The ones that I'm about to show are applicable through a good chunk of Texas. I don't think they'll work everywhere because we have a pretty huge and varied state. So do your homework, make sure what you pick is going to work for you. But at least these will give you a good start. So let me see if I can figure out how to do this again. There we go. All right, let me get to my. We're losing bird.
Oh, show us all of those. Go back. We might want to
go back. Okay.
Yeah, let's run through them.
Okay. I don't want to. The whole impetus for this particular presentation that I had come up with, this is a modified version, was why we're losing birds. because I'm sure most of your viewers are familiar with the fact that we've lost 3 billion birds since the 1970s. If you haven't Googled 3 billion birds, go for it and be depressed, because we're just losing birds left and right, especially birds. There's a lot of Texan birds that are declining in enormous numbers, a lot of grassland birds, about 50% of grassland birds have declined since the 1970s, and that should really make us scared. And one of the things that I was trying to get at with these native plant and bird intersections is that you might have a beautiful backyard like this in this picture. You may have gorgeous feeders with your goldfinches and your pine siskins and whatever else you've got. And you got, you know, your black-eyed Susan and whatever. You've got some plants. It's great. You really have to look at it like a bird. You have to look at it as if you're a bird. So all you've got in this picture is some seeds to feed adult birds. 1 caterpillar species can live on purple coneflower. About 9 can live on St. Augustine grass in that lawn in the back. Maybe 14 on the black-eyed Susan. That's it. That's all you've got. That's not probably going to be enough to support a family of chickadees, even. Just 1 family of chickadees. It might not be enough. If this is cheating, but if you go to the Arboretum, so this is a picture of our savanna at the Houston Arboretum, right in the middle of near downtown Houston. We're right next to the Galleria, if you're familiar with that area. I've just kind of highlighted a random selection of the plants in our landscape and how many species of caterpillars are supported by each of those species. We've got post oaks with nearly 500 species of caterpillars. We've got pines, we've got grasses, we've got flowers. Obviously, you can't have all of this in your yard unless you have a really big property, in which case, go for it. But what I'm saying is birds don't exist in a vacuum. You can't just make a big airplane hangar to house all of the birds. That's not what they need. They don't just need physical space. They need food. They need the plants to support the insects, which are going to support them and especially their babies. So that's my soapbox.
Great.
Yeah, this is just my, this is what you do. This is your 3 guidelines to making a bird-friendly garden. Use 70% native plants, prioritize caterpillar plants, and then add value with extras. There was a big, really
caterpillar plants. Is that maybe on y'all's website? Where would we find a great list of caterpillar plants, Kelsey?
Oh, fab. Oh, really good question. So there's an awesome website that's still in beta, but it is quite useful. It's called the NWF Plant Finder, the National Wildlife Federation, National Wildlife Foundation. I can't talk. National Wildlife Foundation Plant Finder. And if you click on it, it'll ask for your zip code, and you give it your zip code, and it will come up with a list of native plants approximately appropriate to your area. It's still kind of working out the bugs.
Cross-check that with Lady Bird Johnson's in our list.
Cross-check that with Lady Bird Johnson, but the most important thing about the NWF Plant Finder is that it ranks the plants by the number of caterpillar species hosted. So you can go ahead and pick the ones at the top of the list that work for you, and you'll be supporting the most caterpillars and the most birds by picking those ones.
It'll be perfect.
Yeah. There was a really awesome study by a group. The main author was Desiree Narango, Narango et al. 2018. She had her lab looked at every single insect that chickadee families were eating in Washington, D.C., like in specific neighborhoods. They actually like followed the birds around every day and counted and looked at exactly the plants that they were eating from. It was amazing. That's where that it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars information came from. Some poor grad student had to go and watch chickadees catching. But they came up with this metric where they found that in neighborhoods where there was at least 70% biomass of native plants, so like about 70% of the plants that you looked at were native, chickadee populations could increase. Like they could actually add new chickadees to the population. It wasn't just replacement levels. They weren't just making enough chickadees to keep the population ticking over at the same level. If it was below 70%, they started declining. Populations started declining. They weren't able to produce enough offspring. So that's where that 70% number comes from. This is obviously just for Carolina chickadees. It's probably broadly applicable to multiple small bird species, but my rule of thumb is try to have about 70% biomass native plants, which if you can have a tree is easy. You just need like one oak tree, and then that's pretty much 70% of your biomass in your yard. You can have the whole rest exotics. But if you don't have space for a tree, obviously you need to focus more on your natives. You have to have lots of native shrubs or lots of native flowers or native grasses to make up for that lack. And we talked about the caterpillar plants. Trees are great. Flowers can be good depending on what you use. It depends on your area. But here's what, there we go. Here's my top choices.
Yeah.
And all but the cherry will grow in containers.
Okay.
So for many areas in Texas, if you have space for a small tree, like a 20-foot tops tree, any native cherry, like Mexican, or which includes plums. So Mexican plum would be a really good choice in the Houston area. I believe they also are in the South Texas plains. Not sure about your other ecoregions, but there's almost certainly a cherry or a plum that will fit in your region. You have space for a small tree. Those are amazing choices, not only because they host a ton of caterpillars, they're also really pretty. They're beautiful in the spring. They smell really good. And they produce edible fruit. So you can eat them. You can make jam out of them or wine or pie. And then the birds can eat them too. So you're supporting insect-eating birds, you're supporting fruit-eating birds, and you're supporting your pollinators. And then the birds are going to come eat those pollinating insects too in one whole package. So cherries and plums are a really, really good choice. Sunflowers. There's sunflowers everywhere. There's going to be some kind of native sunflower in your area. I guarantee it. Any sunflower, even your common garden sunflower, because that's technically a native species. Your common sunflower seed sunflower is originally a North American native plant to the prairies all along the central part of the US. They're, again, all around amazing plants, and you can grow them in containers. They need to be a big container and they need sun, but you can absolutely grow them in containers. A personal favorite of mine is holly. So native hollies, there's a lot of little shrubby hollies running around. They're often really easy to prune. So I know our native yopon here in Houston, you can prune them into the shape of a teddy bear. You can prune them down to a tiny cube. You could make them look like a bowling ball. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They're evergreen. They're amazing. They support tons of insects. If you get a female, you'll get the berries, which are absolute bird magnets. Thrashers, mockingbirds, bluebirds. Everybody eats those berries. Virginia creeper. Now this one's a little bit of a hard sell. I try to, this is a personal pet plant of mine. I adore this plant. It's a little more challenging to grow in a container, but if you have a nice big pot and a bit of a trellis, so maybe some kind of support sticking up out of the pot, it's a gorgeous native vine. It grows well in sun or shade. It has really cool leaves. I didn't really pick a very good picture here, but it's got these like 5 leaflets, looks like a hand, and they turn beautiful scarlet red in the fall.
Oh, that sounds.
Texas doesn't have fall color. It absolutely does. You're just not looking at the right plants. So Virginia creeper has gorgeous scarlet leaves in the fall, supports tons of insects, and it has great berries. When I see birds migrating through Houston in the fall, most of them are eating Virginia creeper. Even the warblers, I'll see eating Virginia creeper. Tanagers adore it. That seems to be and also the cuckoos. I've seen cuckoos eat Virginia creeper berries, even though they're mostly caterpillar guys. So it's a really, really good plant. Any of our native legumes, so anything in the pea family is a good choice. They tend to support tons of insects. If you love butterflies, by the way, our native legumes are really good choices, especially false indigo. So if you have a sunny container on a deck, false indigo would be a really good choice. It's a gorgeous shrub, really striking sort of greenish blue foliage, these cool deep purple flowers. Looks really exotic, but it is a native. It supports probably the most butterfly species of any single plant in our region or in our state. It supports the sulfurs, so all the beautiful yellow butterflies, a lot of whites, orange tips, dog faces. Those are all supported by false indigo, and it's great for birds. And some of our birds like the seeds as well. Buntings, I think, enjoy the seeds. Native grasses, pick a grass, any grass. There's grasses that grow in shade, there's grasses that grow in sun. You can grow all of them in containers. I grow my grasses in containers. I have a full shade grass called inland sea oats that grows like gangbusters in a pot in my flower bed. Produces tons of habitat, tons of seed, lots of good insects. There will certainly be a native salvia in your region. So those are our native sages.
My mom loves a good salvia.
Yeah, most of them are not human edible, so do be careful. They are in the same genus as our culinary sage, but they're not the same. I picked at random autumn sage as my picture here because it grows really well in containers, in sun, and it's really drought tolerant. Also, all of our salvias, no matter which one you pick, will attract hummingbirds. Even the blue ones and the white ones, I've seen hummingbirds coming to our blue sages at the Arboretum. As long as the flower is tube-shaped, pretty much a hummingbird's going to come check it out. So salvias are great for both insects and for supporting nectar species. And then one of my personal favorites, it's kind of on the low end for supporting caterpillars, but I love it so much that I don't care. Turk's cap, it's a native hibiscus. We have a lot of native hibiscus. Check to see which ones are native to your area because they'll all grow in containers. Turk's cap is a favorite of mine because it grows in full shade to full sun, in full dry to full wet, and it's human edible as well as bird edible. So we talked about human edible natives. Turk's cap has edible flowers. So the flowers are sweet and slightly sour. They're really cool. Obviously don't, munch all the flowers on the plant if you want the hummingbirds to come. But then when the flowers fade, you have these cool little fruits. They look kind of like tiny tomatoes, and they taste like apples. They're really good for making jam. So it's a great, and you can technically eat the leaves too, the young leaves. They are kind of like spinach, but they're not my favorite. They're a little bit hairy, so it's kind of a weird texture. So I'm all about the flowers and the fruit on Turk's cap. But all of these are great choices except for the plum for containers. All of them you can grow on your deck.
That's well, I think the Turk's cap sounds great if it's full sun, full shade, wet, full dry. It sounds impossible to kill.
It's really hard. It's not impossible. No plant is impossible to kill. I found that out the hard way. But it's really hard to kill. And there's so many, there's thousands of native plants in Texas. So if these don't happen to work for you, there's many, many others. Even if it's just one of the ones that I recommend that I didn't put on this list because it doesn't support that many caterpillars, but it's a really good introduction to native plants. Of course, I don't have a picture. It's a plant called Indian blanket. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful daisy, quite short. It's got yellow and red petals. Looks beautiful with bluebonnets. I call it the parking lot plant because it grows in the worst possible blazing sun, no water, no love, just abandoned conditions. And it's so beautiful. And you can grow it in a tiny pot and it'll just be super happy. So Indian blanket is really, really hard to kill. That's a really good.
For us who really don't have green thumbs, we might have to try that one.
Yes. So let me get out of this here. There we go.
Cool. That is just, absolutely can amazing. And especially one thing that I think is super interesting that we've had throughout the presentation is the discussion of how important it is to look at our caterpillar count. As everybody has noticed, she's put her caterpillar count on every plant species that she showed us. And to me, that's phenomenally interesting to think about it more than seeds, more than habitat, really looking at it on how many insects that's going to support to feed our birds is kind of a new way and a different thought process for me anyways, as we look at what to plant in our yards. Now, Maureen did not include this question on my list to ask today, but of course I'm going to go off script because she and I disagree on this one. And so I vote that you can make I like a good Southern living garden, out of the magazines. They have them all manicured, they're grass, and then we've got the edges and these beautiful garden areas. And just because we love native plants and we use native plants in our gardens does not mean we have to have a messy garden. And it doesn't mean we can't have a Southern living garden. Correct, Kelsey?
You are absolutely correct.
Always
I
right,
100% agree with
Maureen.
you.
Y'all tell Maureen I was right.
So I wish I did another presentation not that long ago about native plant gardening, and I had 2 pictures of native plant gardens. One of them looked like a Southern living garden and one of them definitely did not. It really depends on your priorities. You have to live in your space too, right? It's your own ecosystem. So you're sharing it with the birds, and it would be really great if you could make it more useful to your insects and your birds. But it doesn't mean you have to make your backyard look like a messy prairie. Like I said, just one native plant. You could just put one pot with one native plant. It's not creating a giant habitat, but it's something.
Right.
So maybe switch out one tree. Maybe switch out a non-native hawthorn or something with native redbud or a native Mexican plum or something pretty. It's not going to make your neighbors annoyed. It's not going to freak out your HOA. Put in one hummingbird. I know Flamacanthus is a native somewhere out in more western Texas than I am. Everybody loves Flamacanthus. You can buy those in most nurseries, just they don't even list it as a native. It attracts hummingbirds. Everybody likes hummingbirds. Great.
Well, let's talk about where you buy native plants. Going to Home Depot or going to our local garden stores, is that the best place? Kelsey, what is your recommendation on where we go hunt these native plants?
So this is one of those where native plants are really heavier work on the front end. So I know in Houston where I can get native plants. It's going to vary depending on where you are. But generally, Home Depot, not so much. Home Depot and places like that, it helps, again, try to think like a bird. When you're looking at plants, the farther away they are from both where they started geographically and what they looked like historically, the more humans have generally been messing with them. So when people are buying plants, they usually want plants that are appealing to humans. They bloom for a long time. They're easy to care for. They have a high germination rate. Great. So they've been selected by people. So that's this kind of stuff you get at Home Depot because they want to make money. They want to make sure that you're going to be happy with the plants that you buy. Great. When you're a bird, you don't care about any of that. All you care about is, does it have bugs, or does it have seeds, or does it have nectar? Whatever your particular bird concerns are, that's what you're looking for. So plants that have been selected by bugs or plants that have been selected by birds tend to look a bit different than what we often put in our Home Depot type nurseries. So figure out the kind of native plants that would be appropriate to your area. Think about the short list of things that you would look for your yard. Take that list, skip the Home Depot, go to your local non-big chain nursery, like whatever the nicest nursery is in your area, like a place where you can go talk to the staff, get good advice, get a wide variety of nice plants. A nursery that goes a little bit more of the extra mile. In my area, there's a nursery not that far from me that is like that. Like, I trust them, they're good people, I've talked with them. They have a small but good selection of native plants. If you ask the staff at your nursery, hey, do you guys carry Texas natives? They might say yes. Or they might say no, but they might ask you, are you interested in Texas native plants? Because the more people ask nurseries, the more likely it is for them to start carrying them. I make it a point to go into that nursery every time and say, hey, thank you guys so much for carrying all these natives. If you carry this other one that I didn't see, I would totally buy it. So a really awesome resource. This is probably the best place, even if you can't get it there, they'll tell you where to get it, is your local Native Plant Society. So there's a Native Plant Society of Texas, NPSOT. There'll be chapters for your area. There's a Houston chapter, there's an everything chapter. They will be the biggest concentration of native plant knowledge in your area. If they don't have the plants, because a lot of them actually will do plant swaps or they'll do plant sales, they'll tell you where you can find them. So they'll be a really good resource for that. So check out your local nursery that you trust, and then check out the Native Plant Society of Texas.
Absolutely. And another great point is we do have a Texas Master Gardeners Association through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. So as always, you're more than welcome to contact your local county extension office. See if y'all have a Master Gardeners program. I know when my mother was working on her yard, she worked with our Master Gardeners in Parker County and utilized them as a resource to help her plan her as she did some landscaping around the new home. So y'all check those out, and those are awesome resources. Kelsey, we have about gone through our 30 minutes today. It was such a joy to hear from you and get to know you this morning, especially as we learned all about caterpillars. I know we were supposed to talk about birds, but I feel like I've learned so much about caterpillars and plants. I'm not really sure where, I know it all ties together, but it was such a joy to hear from you today and learn a lot more about plants from you. Give us some tips and tricks and kind of direct us towards the right ones. So thank you so much for joining us, Kelsey. Guys, if y'all have any questions for Kelsey, you're more than welcome to reach out to her at the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center and check her out there. And if you have any questions, obviously you can always get those in the chat box, and we will send those to Kelsey as well and put y'all in touch. So thank y'all so much, everyone. Kelsey, thank you for joining us, and everyone have a wonderful Wednesday morning.